welcome to Forever Unbreakable, everybody. Your host, Will Koken, as always. So tonight we are changing up the podcast a little bit in multiple ways. One is we went to a live switcher. So now you might see somebody talking you might see somebody who isn't actually talking if you're watching the YouTube. If you're just doing the audio, you won't see any changes whatsoever. But on the YouTube, I've now reduced my amount of back-end editing time, which allows me to spend more time with my family by doing all of the switching live. So we're gonna dabble with it, but tonight's the first night of that, and then we're also kind of changing the podcast theme a little bit. The majority of things that I get asked for are the self-help type things, so and how people can become better at things. So we're gonna switch the podcast to not all episodes, but a lot of the episodes now are going to be one word focused, and how you can get better in that area or aspect of your life, or a word that has got a super significant amount of importance. And so I'm going to read you the definition to tonight's word. And tonight's word, or today's word, is accountability. And that definition is the fact or condition of being accountable, or responsibility is another way to say that. So let's talk a little bit about accountability in our own lives. And I'll start first with one of the things that I hold myself one of the things that I constantly look at with myself anyways for accountability, and that is in my personal fitness, which with the COVID-19 or coronavirus, whatever you want to call it, how that has affected my ability to hold myself accountable. Jason and I both, who's one of the guests on here tonight, I've got Jason Braun and Justin Gofford on here to talk about this, but it was super easy to hold myself accountable when I had a plan laid out and I had a goal. And my goal, or my short-term goal, which was to run the Zion 100 miler with Jason, that's come to an end. They canceled the race, which is fine. They made the right decision based on everything that we know right now about the virus. As much as it upsets me inside, and I wish that they wouldn't have, because I'm like,
Yeah, as Will's running partner, I just want to emphasize how heartbroken he really is. Just want to emphasize that he's heartbroken, but he's gotten over it.
And so it is heartbreaking. Like, you put in a lot of miles. I'm over 600 miles on the year running, I think it is, or something like that. Anyways, a ton of running. And since then, my running has died down, and some of it's on purpose, and some of it's just me being lazy and willing to cut a run short. And so I think that this topic is at the perfect time for me in my life of holding myself more accountable. And I said, so we're recording this right now. It's Saturday, March 28th, I think. Yeah, Saturday, March 28th. And so I told myself on Monday, like, it's back to a plan. Like, have a plan written down that you're going to follow and begin back on that plan. So I've given myself 1 week to reset now and do that. So I'm excited to, go through some of those challenges. But that's the biggest thing that I have for holding myself accountable right now, that I need to get back on that step, because I was failing where I was holding myself accountable. So we'll turn the camera over to Jason now and let him talk about his.
Man, I don't know that you're failing in any way. Let's face it, the volume that you're putting out up until this point wasn't sustainable for any longer than a training cycle, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's what the coach and I had talked about.
Yeah. So, fill in the blanks if people aren't regular listeners and don't exactly know what's going on. Maybe a year ago? Well, it was before your last deployment. A year and a half ago, maybe.
Yeah, thereabouts.
We were on here and talked about goals and what was next. Common theme with Forever Unbreakable, and for Will and I, that what's next was an ultra. We both wanted. Well, I just want to rephrase that. Will wanted to run 100 miles, and I love Will, and I'm into doing things that are difficult. So I dove into. But as far as the training goes, that's a great example. But accountability goes outside your physical goals, outside just your everyday life. I mean, it's probably the most important component to living a life that's meaningful, because if you can't define what meaning your life has and your life is just a series of days, right? So if you can't define what the purpose of your days are, then you can't define the purpose of your life. And accountability is required to determine what you actually want to get done that day, what your goals are, long-term, short-term, and the only person that's going to make that happen is you. And to me, That's what accountability is. It's taking full responsibility for everything that you do in your life. Everything that goes wrong is generally just the result of a handful of bad decisions combined together, and everything that goes right is usually just the result of a handful of good decisions that were combined together. So I'm bummed. Dude, 6 months ago, if this thing had gotten canceled, and I've been like, woo, okay, we're out of here. Like, I don't have to do this anymore. But the problem is it got canceled after we'd already put in the work, and you flip the mental switch and you're ready to go, and then the rug gets ripped out from under you. It's tough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we go back to talking about that here for a second, right? Is 2 months ago you were like, fuck this race. There's no way that I'm running a 100-miler, or like, not that I'm not running a 100-miler, but I'm not going to execute a good plan, and I'm just going to go out and I'm going to send it for as long as I can send it for. And, we call it the Jason Brawning it, if you will.
That doesn't sound like Jason, just going to send it.
But that's what it is. Like, you're just going to go out and send it. And, you were in that mindset, and you flipped a switch about 2 months ago and started legitimately putting in some miles.
Yeah.
And I think holding yourself more accountable than knowing, like, this is a hefty goal, and if I do want to achieve it, I've got to do something more than what I'm doing. And I know we were talking about it a little bit upstairs too, is that transition now of like, hey, now the business needs you more than anything because of what is going on with the COVID-19, but yet you're still like, I have to do some sort of fitness just to keep my mind right. Otherwise it's,
Yeah, man. I mean, you and I talked about this a handful of times. For me, I'm not a runner. I don't like running. I'm not a big fan of any kind of cardio really anyway, but I've said for years that you can't call yourself an athlete if you can't run. And that's how the whole thing started. I probably would have never put in any miles if it wasn't for the fact that we started doing the Salcom Marathon together every year. And, we always did it carrying a ruck, which is a lot of fun. But you don't run with the ruck. I mean, that's just part of it.
Here and there, little spits and spurts, but that's
you do it to get used to it, condition your skin, all that other stuff, but you really have to still put in the miles. And although I have yet to enjoy a run, we talk about this a lot, when the whole idea of a runner's high, those people are insane. There's no such thing as a runner's high. But that being said, there's value in setting a goal, making yourself accountable to the point of tonight's podcast. But there's something rewarding about putting in that work. And although I don't enjoy running, I really like putting in the work. And that switch that you were talking about that flipped really had more to do with the fact that I don't even remember what exactly happened, but at one point I woke up and I was going, the idea of show up and send it works for a marathon. At 100 miles, so many things are going to go wrong. You can't just wing it. It's not a 10K.
Right.
So that switch just came from, frankly, man, looking at your training. You're such a savage. And I wake up in the morning. I'm on West Coast time, so I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's 7 o'clock here. And I look at my phone. I got a message from Will that has his morning run, and it's like, I ran 24 miles before work today, and I'm not even out of bed yet. And I'm like, oh Jesus.
Yeah, and I joined him for probably 12 of them, maybe. And that's on a weekend. Will's a weekday runner for, big miles like that, and I can fit in an hour on the weekday, but still,
it's sick, dude. I mean, his work ethic. That's one thing this podcast is missing. There's a whole bunch of time that Will brings people on here, and he's just because of the way he is. You always have people on that you think are interesting, motivational, have something to share with your listeners. But we've talked about this 1,000 times. It's never happened yet, but one of these days, the guest on Forever Unbreakable is going to be Will Koken, because I've never met anybody that puts out like you put out. It's insane. And that is frankly what got me excited. I saw you having fun with training, and I went, oh, maybe training can be fun. Maybe this can be a good time. And decided to start putting it in. And then just about the time I got serious, I agree. Got pulled out from underneath us.
Will's got me motivated every day to get out and run, man. And, actually, I've always kind of been a runner, and it kind of turned it back a little bit to how you were talking about, I don't like running. So to me, running is one of the most accountable things you can do. You got to be extremely accountable to get out of bed and run in the morning, or even at any time of the day. I know so many people that just, I don't like running. So, you know, I gotta.
Does anybody like running?
I do
people,
personally.
Even people
I
who
do.
like running, do they really like running? I mean, do you
Yeah.
like running like you like that lasagna your wife made tonight? Like,
Oh.
you know, probably not.
Not quite like that. But in that sense, because you don't like it, that's why accountability comes into play so much, I feel like. Because you don't like it, the fact that, you know, you're kind of resisting against that urge to go out there and run, you're going to hold yourself more accountable when you do go out there and run. And that's where accountability comes into play.
So this is what I want to ask you about, because this is kind of where the accountability piece started from, or having this specific podcast, was you're doing an event in September with a group of people, most of which are not runners and have never run any real distance in their life, to include a 5K even, right?
Right,
These
yeah.
are people that haven't really even, you know, most of them haven't run more than around their block at any given point since they, you know, graduated high school. So
Yeah, it's a
talk
group of
about
6 of
what you
us.
got going
Yep.
on there.
Yep. A group of 6 runners. Ashley and I decided. Ashley, she wanted to sign up for a half marathon this year, just to make sure she gets out and continues to run.
Hell yeah.
And train. And so we picked this lacrosse marathon, or half marathon, excuse me, and it's called the Maple Leaf Walk Run. And then I put it out there on social media and said, hey, Ashley and I are doing this half marathon if anybody wants to join. And I got some reach out from a couple friends, you know, Angela Smith, Mark Smith. He's not actually doing the run, but he should. I just want to throw that out
We'll
there.
call him out right
But-
now.
Yeah, let's get him in
But,
here. Let's have a little talk with the
but
man.
Reed-
We'll get him running.
Reed Rentmeester, you know Reed well.
Yep.
You know, Roxy LaRue and Derek Brusta, her significant other. So, yeah, just a group reached out, and we started this.
So you got Reed doing a half marathon?
Reed got Reed doing a half marathon.
That's dope. Good
Which is,
job, man. I
Which
love
is
it.
awesome.
That is
Yeah.
awesome.
Which is totally awesome.
He's down like 50 pounds.
Yeah, you know, Reed will probably be a guest on here sometime, and you know, I'm not gonna put him under any pressure to come on here. Or
No,
anything,
do
but,
it. Go ahead,
But
put him
it's
under
a
some
great
pressure.
story, and Reed's a great guy, and you know what? I think you'd be a great guest on your show. Just to say that.
So, you know, I have reached out to Reed about being on here, and he is currently not willing to come on, but his time is coming.
Yeah, good. Yeah, he's great.
Why? See, that's one of the funny things. People are always like, well, doesn't that make you nervous? We're drinking whiskey in Will's basement. It's just another Saturday night. Like, there happens to be microphones and headphones, but this is what we do. The funny thing about these conversations is these are the conversations that we have when we're just hanging out. As a matter of fact, the podcast sometimes makes them a little bit more clunky. But how often do we sit around and talk about accountability?
Dude, 100% of the time. This is a normal word in our vocabulary. You know, and as I tell people, I'm like, the keys to success it's very simple. There's like 5 or 6 words that define, will you be successful or will you not, you know? And I would say, like, the first is believing in that. And then a part of it is like getting into the discipline and accountability of yourself and your actions, and learning to respect and enjoy that journey. And that's where, like, as we talked about the training, that's what, like, I've learned to respect and love, is the amount of effort that has to be put in through the journey to achieving whatever you want to achieve, be it, you know, a physical feat or success in business or any of that. But it really starts with, like, first you have to hold yourself accountable and your ability to do that. And then how do we hold others accountable? And that's where I was getting at with Justin, with, like, he's got a group set up now where they're emailing and texting each other every day.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
like
it's great.
sending each other their workouts and like, hey, here's what I did. What did you do? You know, and like holding each other
Absolutely.
accountable to achieve the end goal of a half marathon, for so many of them that have never, you know, even participated in a 5K. So I remember the first time that I looked at a marathon, and I hadn't even done a half marathon. And I was like, people who run marathons are crazy. Like, that's not possible. And I looked at
Right.
100, like, I can't wait to fucking knock out 100. When at one point in my life, so like I've got a tremendous amount of respect at people who are looking at half marathon and have never done a 5K before,
Right.
because it looks like climbing a friggin' mountain.
100%.
And it is for them in some cases. You know, I put out a little bit of an idea training plan on our group chats and things like that, in our emails. And you know, it's kind of motivating for me to get this mock personal trainer feel, I guess. But, you know, I'm not really one, but you know, from the hours I put into the training, I reflect on that, from my last marathon and learning from that, and kind of just hand off that knowledge to some people that might need it or might be able to use it. So I put this little 2-week training plan of 4 miles here, 3 miles, 2 miles, a 12-week or a 12-mile week. And, some of them are just, what? 12 miles in a week? No, I can't do that.
Yeah, but if you, I mean, if you break it down, 6 2-mile runs.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Now, fair enough. But imagine being a guy who, to Justin's point, hasn't run since gym class.
Yeah.
2 miles
Right. Yeah.
that's a long distance, man. Like that's a run. That's a real run. And I hesitate to say that because I'm afraid like coming out of my mouth that people are gonna be like, whatever, dude. Like I'm not being by no means is any of this condescending or anything like that.
When you started back up after not training for so long, 1 mile run was difficult. And this is what I tell people too. I'm like, yes, it's called a 2 mile run, right? The plan says go out and run for 2 miles. Nobody's
Should
there.
take run out of that.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. Nobody's there telling you that you have to run the whole time. What you really need to do is you need to go be active for 2 miles, and that's why, I love the plan that my coach has me on, where it's run at time. So it might be run for 30 minutes, run for an hour, run for an hour and a half, whatever it is. But I've got plenty of days where it's like, if you got to walk. It says right in the plan. It's like today is not a push yourself today. Today is a survive day, and then there's days where it's like, all right, you're going to run these 400 repeats for an hour and a half, and you're going to hate life, and you're going to want to fire me as a coach. But,
Right.
It's like I have a coach to hold me accountable as well on days that I can't hold myself accountable. Like there's a plan that I've got to finish.
That's something we talked about too was, okay, not everybody likes to run to 2 miles because maybe for somebody, or to miles, because maybe for somebody, 2 miles takes a half hour, or for somebody else it takes 10 minutes. So that's exaggerating. I don't know who runs 2 miles.
A lot of people will when he tries hard enough.
I do not run 2 miles in 10
believe
minutes.
But, so I said, well, maybe think about it from a time perspective. Can you run for 30 minutes tomorrow and then, 45 minutes the next day, or take a day off, run 45 minutes the day after that, run an hour on Saturday? What can you do to accomplish the goal that you want to get to? And,
Do 100%.
And how can you get there? And don't kill yourself if you're, not getting out. Make sure you do the best that you can.
Do 100%.
Yeah.
But also make sure you're honest with yourself about what the best you can looks like.
Yeah.
Because I don't care who you are, the toughest dude on the planet screws that equation up. It's really super easy to be like, I got this knee thing that's been bothering me, so I'm just gonna take a rest day today. You know what? Still hurts today. I'm gonna take another rest day. At a certain point, accountability means you made a training plan and you're going to stick to it. And if you have to break that plan for good reason, then break it for good reason. But you start making excuses for what a good reason looks like, and you're off the rails. It just can't be that way.
I want honesty is a huge thing. When I was
point.
Writing down a couple of little notes of key things that I want to talk about, which we'll get into, which is like some of the how to keep employees accountable and things like that, right? But when I was talking to my wife about accountability, one of the key words that kept coming up was honesty, being honest. Like a lot of times,
especially with yourself.
Yeah. A lot of times people will ask you and be like, hey, how was your run today? And it'll be a day where you didn't run necessarily, or you didn't do whatever you said you were going to. And you want to take the easy answer out, which is like, oh, it was good. I got it done. But the fact is you didn't, or it wasn't. And so part of that is just being very transparent and honest. And as Jocko would say, like extreme ownership, like just owning what you did. And so I think honesty is such a huge proponent to accountability. Like you can't hold yourself accountable. You can't hold somebody else accountable unless you're going to be honest about it.
And to people watching, understand that integrity, honesty is a learnable trait. You don't have to, dwell on the fact that maybe you did make a dishonest move one time in the past and now that makes you dishonest forever. No. You can counter and correct that, and in integrity and accountability go hand in hand. So
Absolutely.
Just know that, just because maybe you made a hiccup in the past, and dang it, I like to crutch on these excuses. You can always make up for that. There's nothing wrong with, having done that in the past. The thing is to correct the future, and that's going to drive you towards accountability.
One of the things on this podcast that keeps coming up over and over and over again. Literally I don't know how many times I've been on, but every episode that we have, one of the things that keeps coming up is your core group and the people that you choose to surround yourself with and what they do for you. And one of the big things they do, of course, is hold you accountable. But the other side of that coin is that people that are there to hold you accountable are not holding you accountable because they're calling you and saying, you didn't run today, you suck. What they're doing is they're calling you and saying, how was your run today? Like you said. And do you take the easy way out and say, I mean, here's the thing with doing endurance, any kind of endurance event, even if it's a 10K. At some point, the check comes. People are going to know if you did your training or not. And as long as you know that, you know that you have to get the time in. But to me, you brought up Jocko, and everything I preach, everything that you and I talk about, I tell people this all the time. I don't have an original idea in my head. I don't.
Same.
Every single thing I believe in, the way that I live my life, the ethos by which I conduct my business, they're all borrowed from somebody else, plagiarized.
But neither does anybody even like Jocko, because this stuff, like these people have been doing this since what, the beginning of time, holding themselves accountable. This isn't new content, and what I hope that's being provided through this is like an understanding that we are all human. We have days where we fail to do what we had planned, and
whose fault is it?
Hold ourselves accountable for that.
Whose fault is it when you don't execute your plan? Whose fault is that?
It's your fault. It's your own fault because you didn't execute on the plan that you had.
Every time. And I mean, we keep bringing up Jocko. I'm guessing everybody that listens to Forever Unbreakable knows who Jocko Willink is. But if you don't, if you're interested in this topic because we're discussing it or for any reason, you owe it to yourself to go out and pick up a book. It's by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, two guys from SEAL Team 3, I believe it was, Task Unit Bruiser.
Yep.
They were responsible for taking Ramadi in Iraq, some of the bloodiest battles that occurred in Iraq. But besides that, they've each excelled in their military careers and then parlayed that to successful business careers. They're super, super impressive guys. I'm a little bit of a fanboy. Jocko actually owns the gym that I train jiu-jitsu at. You guys know that. But if you're interested in this topic and you want the best bare bones, no bullshit handbook for taking accountability for your life, you need to buy Extreme Ownership. And essentially what it breaks down is that every single person is 100% responsible for everything that happens to them. Nothing happens to us, right? But everything that happens to them in their life is 100% their responsibility. And further to that, if you're a leader in an organization and the organization is failing, it's the responsibility of the leader. 100% responsibility of the leader to make that organization successful. And a lot of people that work for somebody hear that and they go, oh, thank God it's my boss's fault. Well, bullshit. You're not, just because you're not the boss doesn't mean you can't be a leader.
Correct.
Every organization needs leaders. Decentralized command is, number 4 of the 4 rules of combat. If you read the book, you'll understand all that.
No, absolutely. And I think that in organization, I think a lot of people define it as like something that is, set in stone and it's got structure and stuff like that. And to touch on what Justin's doing is he created basically an organization. Exactly. It's only six people who training for a common goal. And so, so he's now in charge of that basically and holding those individuals accountable. And I hear in the morning, because we talk about it during some runs, he's like, how do I get them to log more miles and to do this and to do that? So what are you kind of doing? Walk us through, Justin, what you're doing to help those guys out, besides just providing them some workout, because you've kicked around a lot of ideas as to, different things like the dollar challenge and things like that. So what are you guys currently doing that, to hold each other accountable?
Well, right now, I mean, obviously there's been a little bit of a paradigm shift with this COVID-19 thing and people staying in. So, we're a little bit easy on, driving messages out to them, asking them about how their run went. There's been a plan to have a 2-week run, a 2-week run plan and take it every 2 weeks, and try and meet those runs. And if you didn't,
don't run for 2 weeks. They'll all quit, for sure.
Don't run for 2 weeks. But, a 2-week run plan where most plans are here's an 18-week training plan, follow it. Taking this lightly, we got a long ways to go before the race. Here's 2 weeks of running, try and meet these runs. You know, and as far as getting out and running with some of the guys and girls, I haven't yet. So I want to incorporate that, and hopefully as soon as this epidemic flies by and we start to kind of get more into this circle of life thing, hanging out with each other and not afraid to go and interact and do things together. I mean, to be honest, I'm not. We kind of practice social distancing in any manner. I mean, look at us. We're all 6 feet apart right now. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
We're about 3 feet apart.
But that's why we went to the different cameras and all that, was to create some additional space
But,
for this.
yeah.
Instead of having, usually when I do the two people on the other side, usually you're on one camera and you're, shoulder to shoulder, heads got to be leaned into the same thing to make
Plus,
it
I've
work.
been dealing with this nasty cough. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. But in all seriousness,
It only comes up when I'm around other people, so it's fine.
Yeah.
we run in the mornings and we're it's just us out on the road. We gotta trust each other that we're not gonna put each other in jeopardy or anything.
sure.
So like my accountability is if I'm feeling under the weather, I'm gonna stay in or run by myself. You know what I mean? Or if I feel like, hey, you know what, I got this. Guys are good. I don't have anything to worry about. Let's get out there and run.
Yeah, and
you
we
know?
and we've been that way as far as our group of runners, me, you, and Justin Rolane. We've
Yeah.
been that way since we started running. Like if one of us feels under the weather, we're like, hey,
Yeah.
A, I need to take the day off, get the rest that my body needs to recover and heal. And B, I don't want to give this to any of you guys, even if it's just a minor cold. Like it doesn't matter. We've generally been that way. So
Yeah, and
to
we hear
me-
it. We
to
hear
me,
it
not
from
a
each
lot is
other
changing
too.
as far as
it's
that
like,
goes.
man, I wish I could get out there. This is really dragging on me
Yeah.
right now.
The funny thing is, you brought up two different motivations for staying home. One was that I don't feel good. I want to rest and recover. But that's nonsense because I know you way better than that. You will train through the flu, through a cold, mono, AIDS, whatever you got. You're just you
Yeah.
keep training.
The only
But-
difference is I go train by myself. Then
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But truth is, it's smarter. It's smarter to do that. Take the rest when you need the rest, and in the end, it's good. But yeah, be a better training partner.
Yeah, and to go back on the question, I guess, is Will asked, what am I doing to help try and keep others in the group accountable? It's those when I get out for a run, even though we're distance, like for example, Angie lives in Milwaukee, Reed's on the other side of town. We don't always get together. So, when we talk, it's via message and just motivational speech right now. The idea is hopefully to get out and do some 5Ks together. Actually, not me. Angie proposed the idea to do some 5K runs together to get people out and running,
Oh, yeah.
and actually challenge themselves in an actual race versus
Dude, I love that. That's
versus
awesome.
every day. So, because it is a battle when you're doing a battle with self. It's not if you don't have a running group like I've got, around here, it's hard to get out there every morning. So that's where accountability comes into play. And
Dude,
so far,
the hardest battle is yourself. Like that is the hardest battle. Is the
for sure.
battle with
and you know what?
yourself.
There's a great quote. A great philosopher, Plato, said, and I'm sure you guys know who he is. We're all kind of micro philosophers.
Yeah, I made that colored
Yeah.
stuff that we modeled when we were kids. I remember.
But it's the first and greatest battle that you will ever win is the battle of self. And that's really one of the great. It's a great quote. I kind of like to challenge it because I don't think you can ever win that battle. But
I don't think you can either.
but
Here's why. We always go back to the network and the people that you believe in and that are going to help make you better. How many times? So the three of us have all put our fair share of miles in. Some of them together, some of them by ourselves, some of them with other people. But how many times have you had a run scheduled? I know I can say pretty much every single time that Will and I run at 4 a.m. I really don't want to be there. And would I do it by myself? Yeah, maybe, but maybe I wouldn't 1 out of 5 times, or maybe even 1 out of 3 times. But I can tell you, if I say I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. And that is so valuable on the day where you would rather do anything but get out of your warm bed, go outside where it's 7 degrees, and go run 15 miles. But if there's somebody that is putting on their shoes on the other side of town waiting for you to show up, you're going to be there. And on your worst day, maybe you go back to bed. But even on your worst day, when you have somebody that you're accountable to that is going to be there, you show up anyway.
100%.
Yeah,
I don't know how many
It's
times I've said,
huge.
every time we get out in the morning, I don't know how many times I've said, hey man, I've got this my foot. Oh my gosh, it's killing me right now. I don't know if I'm gonna make it the whole way.
Yeah, I made shit up
And
too.
then here I go. I'm out the whole way. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly. I
it's
mean,
just kind of
there's plenty of days in your training plan where you've been training for this half marathon in September, and you've now gone and run 12 miles. So it's like you're at that point where you could go run a half marathon tomorrow, which is awesome to see. So now you're just refining your craft and holding yourself accountable. But one of the things that we've started to transition to now that I want to really get into talking about is how do we hold other people accountable? So like holding ourselves accountable is pretty defined out, but it gets a little bit more difficult as we hold other people accountable. Because one of the things that I tell people all the time is the only way you can hold an individual accountable to a specific thing is you have to understand their value system and what they hold at the highest levels
Right.
of regard. And I think probably, Jason, you've got the most experience with this because you've had, probably 40 different people that have worked under you
Oh, I don't think it's that.
in
It's hard to say.
in Apex since you've started Apex.
Mhm.
There's a lot because there's always turnover in any company. I don't care.
right.
Yeah, of
You can
course.
be the greatest boss ever, and you'll always have turnover.
And I'm
It's
not.
just-
So
it's just a nature of the beast. But talk a little bit about like some of the accountability tactics that you've used since you've been in a leadership role, and then we'll switch over to you, Justin, and things that you use to hold people accountable that people listening to the podcast could use, be it in business or anything in life that seems to have worked,
sure.
depending on different variables.
I'm really I'm definitely a 30,000 foot view kind of guy. I don't micromanage, and a lot of times when you ask somebody for tactics to hold your people accountable, what they really want is they want you to tell them A, B, C, D, E, basically a system or a network of goals and reviews and punishment for failures and rewards for successes and all that other stuff. And to me, it's not about that. For me, it's about culture. And one of the things in a company that's important in any company is that you have a culture of insert positive whatever here. It doesn't necessarily have to be a culture of profitability or a culture of customer service or any of those things. For us, it was just really as simple as defining what makes our company special. And in our case, what makes our company special, basically a few things. One, we're really, really proud of what we do. We're proud of who we are as a business. You and I had a conversation earlier where some names of some of my, I'll say competitors,
Yeah.
In some contexts, the word competitor actually doesn't even feel right for me to say because I don't feel like they're playing the same game that we're playing. But that being said, there's a lot of other really, really good companies in our area that do exactly the same thing that we do. But the thing that makes us different from them is just a couple of really, really simple things. And it's the fact that we're really proud of what we do. We have a lot of pride within our company of who we are and what we believe in. The second one is that we're compassionate. And the business that I'm in requires a lot of sacrifice on the part of my staff. And if my staff doesn't sacrifice, then our customers don't get what they need. And what they need is a necessary thing. It's a need, especially at certain times of year. So compassion doesn't sound like a business term. It doesn't sound like something that would fit into this conversation that we're having about holding people accountable, but it absolutely is. It matters because if we have a culture of compassion within our business, we have a culture of pride in our business, then what's left? Then we just have to make sure we keep our foot on the gas, right? So the third thing is perseverance. So whenever I have a conversation with an employee, whether it's a conversation where we're correcting behaviors or a conversation where we're rewarding, use your words, Jason, rewarding good behaviors. Must be the border Berman.
Yeah.
W.
Yeah, that's right. We're rewarding good behaviors, and I always boil. It just distills down to those basically those three separate things, and I will point them out in name. If there's something, if somebody fell short of any of the metrics or any of the goals that we set for them in a company, odds are good they probably violated one of those three core principles, and I will go to them and be like, what our three core principles are. And number 2 is compassion. And this is why you violated that core principle. And it's much easier to hold somebody accountable for not executing on it. If I come to you and I say, Will, you didn't get that paperwork done on time, there's a million excuses for why you wouldn't get that paperwork work done on time. But if I go to you and I say, Will, one of the things that we believe in one of our biggest parts of our company's culture is on-time execution of projects, and it was your responsibility to execute that project on time. Our core principle number 2 is that we always execute projects on time. Then you can go, oh shit, I didn't. And that helps you build a culture where people feel like they want to be accountable. Because if that individual, again, I don't expect anybody to do anything for me. I don't expect anyone to do anything for any reason other than what really means something to them, and everybody wants to succeed. But if we don't reward values and we instead reward behaviors, people become like dogs, and they understand exactly what they need to do to get the reward and exactly what they don't need to not do to get punished. Problem is that's different for everybody, and that's, I think, what you were driving at. You have to understand really what people believe and really what they want, and that interestingly goes back to core principle number 2, which is compassion. Be compassionate for your staff. Find out what it is that makes you tick. What do you believe in? What's important to you and your family? How do I help make that happen for you? And if I'm doing my best to help make that happen for you, then you're going to do your best to perform for my company and my customers.
Yeah, you want to run through those 3 principles one more time, because honestly, it's great to hear those again. And you make a great point with all that.
It's really simple, man. They are pride, compassion, perseverance. So,
PCPs, PCIs.
Be proud of what we do and who we are. Be compassionate to the people that we serve, because they, in many cases, not only do they keep the lights on, but we have I feel like we have a duty to take care of them. And persevere. Be tough. I mean, you guys know me. The one thing that I value above all else is toughness. When I interview new people, I say, I'm straightforward with everybody. I value tough guys and gals more than anything else. I love toughness. I like people that go, this is hard, but I like it that way. Let's do this. And that's super meaningful to me. So yeah, those are the 3. And anything that you do in my business, if you work for me and every time that comes time to make a decision, decide yes or no on anything, if you think to yourself, am I proud of what I'm doing? Is it the compassionate thing to do? And do I have the guts to continue to push forward and pull it off? Then it's always going to be the right decision. Simple.
And a part of that, I want to talk about that last piece because it ties back in the compassion thing, right? Is the perseverance or the guts, right? A part of that is making those 2 decisions, believing in them so much that you can turn and honestly, and I'm going to say honestly again, say that to the individual, like, this is why I did what I did. This is why I made the choice that I made. And I make that with pride and I make that with compassion. But I can honestly say like this is why. And I think that honesty, hitting on that honesty again, with accountability it's so important.
It's huge. It's everything.
To come back and be honest about it. If anything happens and you can do one thing, like it is to come back and be honest about it. But you have to be, no matter how hard that is. Because the boss at a lot of companies or organizations or groups isn't going, that leader is many leaders. The majority of people, they're not leaders, they're in leadership positions, right?
Yes.
And there's a significant difference between a leader and somebody who is in a leadership position. And you'll tell it to those people honestly, and they won't be able to receive that. So it's very like, as you do that, I caution people a little bit. It's kind of that know your audience, right? Everybody has to be led differently.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also every leader has to be, coached differently by the people under them if they're smart enough to be able to do any level of coaching of that individual. And so I always tell people, I've worked with tons of soldiers and people in the civilian sector who can't get along with their boss or their senior leadership in the military. And I'm like, what are you doing to help coach that individual to be a better leader?
Correct.
Because there are aspects to that. And one thing's hitting on Jocko again that he hit on perfectly in his last book, that field manual, was the understanding of how to be led. And what things you need to be able to do to be properly led. And I think that has a significant amount of weight. And that's what I'm going to transfer it over to Justin with here, is this like being led aspect, because you've got a far greater understanding for that than Jason, who's been the king of the ship for several years now.
Sure.
So I think it's kind of like a little bit interesting dynamic. You work for a huge corporation, being Wisconsin Public Service. So like you understand, and having been military, that all the different leaders where I know that Jason's got a great understanding of this as well from his time having been led before, but it's been
Not really though,
but it's been a
man.
long time since you've been connected to that.
It's been a minute. I think about that sometimes. I think about how hard, like in terms of being compassionate to my employees, I think about how hard it is to be an employee. I think about how tough, like, take the most basic, all right, this is going to be easy. What's the number one thing people get in trouble for at work?
Being late,
Being late.
100% of the time.
100%. And I'm not saying that I'm in the majority here. I'm sure that there's a lot of guys that aren't this way. I'm guessing this doesn't fly at Wisconsin Public Service.
It depends on what role you're in. You know, it's
For
a big
sure.
company, and there's a lot. You know, the service industry and the utility industry in specifically. I mean, is a service industry for millions of people.
Right,
You know,
right.
I mean, out in the field, there is no concept of being late. You're always
course.
working. You know,
Yeah.
you're always on call. So.
But to Will's point regarding being honest and being straightforward, I'm in a fortunate position. I run a small business. You know, I don't have 100 people answering to me, so it's not as big of an issue probably. But I am so big on honesty. Just be straight with me. And if you're late for work because your brother you haven't seen in a couple of years came to town and you guys sat up and, drank a bottle of bourbon and you just couldn't shake it off in the morning and get to work and you show up 15 minutes late and I say, hey man, what's up? And you look at me and go, I got drunk with my brother last night and I just slept right through my alarm, dude. I'm going to be so much happier with that answer than some nonsense about, I don't know, you got pulled over, got in a car accident, don't give me any bullshit. So
Yeah, my
the
furnace
honesty
went
thing
out,
is
or
big.
my sump pump stopped working, or
Yeah,
whatever
so
it might be.
So these opportunities are huge for me for the question that Will just asked about you be working for who you work for. Like what, from your perspective, you're a guy that's served in the military, that's been around probably really, really good leaders and probably some really shitty ones.
Oh yeah, touche.
What are the, like, to go back to Will's question, like in terms of being led, like what do you look for?
I mean, it's a great question, and it's a difficult question to answer because I've always seen myself in the mirror as a leader, but I've really never been in many leadership positions.
Dude,
So
you
there you go.
absolutely
So-
are. You absolutely are a leader, because I listen to the way you talk in the morning, and you're always looking for people to help mentor. Like you are a phenomenal mentor, because you seek opportunities to help people who need the assistance.
That goes
Yeah,
back to
yeah.
the beginning of this podcast. Leadership isn't a title.
yeah,
You know?
and actually that you hit the nail on the head with what I was gonna say. With that goes back to Jason's point about I forget the term you used. It started with a D. What'd you call him?
Dick. Wait.
First word Jason thinks of it starts with a D.
Yeah, facts.
My bad.
But decentralized
Decentralized
leadership, and decentralized leadership should be prevalent in the workplace. I mean, and honestly, when you don't have it, it's kind of infectious.
For sure.
I see that all over the workplace, and when you don't have decentralized leadership and people that are willing to take accountability, even though they're not in a leadership position, things kind of fall apart at the seams because there's a lot of followers out there, and they're looking for somebody to take advice to heed. And if it's negative advice, they might cling on to that.
Will, how many
And,
people in, take like your platoon for example, how many people is any individual or any individual leader responsible for?
So the max inside of a platoon is 4 individuals. It's the max that anybody's responsible for, and that's the platoon sergeant, who's really got 36 people under him, but he's only responsible for his 4 squad leaders.
And that's what decentralized command
Yeah.
means. It's just because the CEO, use an extreme example, one of the biggest corporations in the world, Amazon. Jeff Bezos is not responsible for the people that are putting labels on boxes.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Right.
He's responsible for them overall, but they don't follow his leadership. They follow the leadership of somebody else, and probably not even a manager in that department. Probably somebody that just works in that department that does a kick-ass job, that every time somebody needs something, they turn their head and they look at that guy and say, hey man, how do we handle this? So that's what I mean by leadership is not a title. And I hear you talk about your career too and things that you want to do to to make things better. And you're always so damn positive about it. It's dope.
Positivity's been my namesake. I mean, honestly, I don't see it all the time because I live with myself. I'm a day to day,
Hmm.
so we all have our own inner demons, and we got to work on those. And that's why I think that Plato quote is kind of, it's a little far fetched. It's hard to conquer yourself. So,
100%,
but
man.
but I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit. But where I was going with the decentralized leadership in the workplace, and um, even if your leader isn't necessarily there, and you talked about how you could be a leader, but or there's difference between leaders and leadership titles, right? So even in a workplace, they don't even call them leaders anymore in the corporate industry. It's a supervisor or it's a manager. They went away with the term leader, which I think is kind of interesting because
That is
maybe it's
interesting.
because they
It's
couldn't meet up to it. I
it's
don't
one
know,
of the things that I asked Jeremiah
but
to bring back into his company when I was talking to him about it. I was like, I challenge you to bring back team leaders. Bring the team leader role in, a role where somebody is focused on leading and you've got them focused on that. It is a core value that you focus them on.
Dude,
And because I think
agree.
that it's important. They have to understand that leadership is in their title, and it's what their role and responsibility is and their focus. One of the things that I've learned and that I pass on to other people all the time, when you've got a micromanaging leader, I'm like, have you talked to them about that? And then have you challenged them to give you the opportunity to not be micromanaged? And that is one of the ways that I think that you coach a micromanaging leader, right? Because they don't necessarily know that they're micromanaging. Because a lot of times I don't know that I'm doing something unless somebody tells me. It kind of think of it like the biting of the nails, right? Somebody who bites their nails all the time, they typically don't know that they don't even notice that they're chewing on their nails unless
Correct.
somebody's like, "Hey man, you got to stop chewing on your nails. It's driving me nuts," right? Because you just don't
and then
realize
they're
it.
like, oh,
So it's the
I
same thing.
forgot I was doing that.
It's the same thing with a micromanaging leader. But most people are afraid especially with micromanaging leaders, they're really afraid to say anything to that leader because they know that that leader will take it almost too seriously. Be like, no, I'm not micromanaging. There's no way I'm doing that. So you got to come to them with a plan. Like, hey, I feel like I'm being micromanaged. And you might not, and you sit them down first and be like, hey, I need to talk to you about this. It's very important to me. And where I'm at in this company, and I need your support with this. Can we talk this through? And then you simply say to them, hey, I feel like I'm personally being micromanaged. When I look at other employees in the department, I feel like they're also being micromanaged. Here's a plan that I have. So don't just come to them with, the one thing that I always beat up my soldiers when they come to me with an issue, I'm like, so what's our plan to fix it? And they're like, well, I don't know.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, I'm not always the greatest problem solver, but you know personally what you need to be the most successful. And if that's to have less management over you, then I'm going to challenge you to prove to me that you can have less management over you and produce the same quality and quantity or better numbers, right?
Right,
I
right.
want to see more. I want to see at a minimum we hit the same markers, or I want to see more. So if you can prove that, I'm game. So if you have a micromanaging, I gotta work on my words too, Jason.
Nah, we're all there. We're all there.
If you have
So,
a micromanaging leader, for any type of thing that you want to help coach somebody who's above you, you have to have a plan when you walk in there. And so I always say, like, especially with the micromanaging, like, here's my plan. Here's what I want to train on the next week. So this is what I want to train my employees on, or this is what I want to train myself on. My goal is to be able to do, this, this process. Like, so let's say you're doing window installs, right? My goal is to do, these 4 window installs, have them meet like an air leakage quality for the, whatever, and an install quality. And when you come back and look at it, which I hope that you do, because you should spot check me. You're my leader. And I expect you to still come back and spot check me, right?
100%.
Because then
Inspect what you expect.
correct. And so that's giving them the opportunity to still manage because they're coming back and inspecting. So like, hey, here's where you can micromanage me. Like, come back and inspect my work and help me become a better window installer. Or, in your case where you program a bunch of code and stuff like that, like, come back and check my stuff, make sure that my quality is the way that it's supposed to be, and that I am achieving. And I think that
Right.
this
Don't just throw me out there to say, hey, put out this work, and I'm gonna go disappear over here. You know,
yeah,
and I love that. I love to hear you say that as a leader. You know, throwing some trust at your, subordinate to give them a task, and say, hey, you know what? You don't like the way that this has been happening here. I want to make this work for both of us, and I'm going to throw this at you and give you some responsibility, and I'm going to trust and hold you accountable for it. And
'cause
that's just a huge thing
that's
from a employee perspective, even.
yeah,
So
because that's what's happening, or what I see happen too. Right, is like these businesses preach decentralized command when they've got multiple layers of leadership, and I really see it in the military the most. And when I go and talk to companies that have a decent amount of employees, and they're preaching this decentralized command, which is, it's another textbook Jocko thing as well.
Yeah, it's a Jocko term.
Where it doesn't work is when that manager, supervisor, as they call them, right? Or let's be legitimate here, that leader, when they are over decentralized, when they've removed themselves from the picture, and they're just like, these guys will execute, right? They're not checking that work. They're not ensuring the quality is being executed. And, in your world, Jason, that turns into a callback, and every callback is free money out the door.
Right.
And so that really, really matters from a business standpoint. And it, to me, in the military, it's life or death. Like, if you're not training your guys, if they're not learning what your voice sounds like to react to that voice because you're not present, like, it's a huge, huge significance. And I always preach to my guys, presence, like present leadership.
Yeah.
Being there, being an actual leader. And then sometimes I'll hear their Joes say, hey, man, this guy's micromanaging the shit out of me. And then I go through the micromanagement coaching, and I talk to the leader, the squad leader team, and I'm like, hey, are you micromanaging your guys? Do you feel like you're micromanaging your guys? And they're like, well, you say I got to be a present leader, so I got to be here all the time. And it's a double-edged sword, right? So that's why I bring up this other.
It is and it isn't.
That's why I bring up this other.
Again, now you got to go back to since we're all just rubbing Jocko's nuts here. You got to go back to his second big seller, which was he had
the dichotomy of leadership.
Dichotomy of leadership. He had extreme ownership, followed by the dichotomy of leadership, followed by the discipline equals freedom field manual, and the dichotomy of leadership touches on all of that stuff, because decentralized command is great, but we're talking about micromanaging and decentralized command, and those two things can't exist in tandem. Because if the leader at the top of that food chain is a micromanager, he's not going to be willing to decentralize command. I lived this because I frankly am not responsible for the success of my company anymore. All I can do is sit back and look at the leader, the real leader that put himself in that position, and know that I have put someone in place who I know believes in the values that our business has always survived and thrived on, and I trust him to do the right things. And the reason that I have to trust him to do the right things is because I'm not there. So if I'm not the person standing in front of those individuals that are responsible for executing what our business is there to execute, then how in the world am I supposed to sit here? I can't then micromanage them. So I have one choice, and that's to take everything that I've pushed forward in my business and everything that my business means to me and everything that we do differently from our contemporaries, and saying, I've planted all of these seeds, I've built this machine, but I'm not the person that's there to hold these people accountable. So I'm an asshole if I try to stand on the sidelines and yell like a head coach and expect people to give me what I want them to give me. That's what decentralized command really means. It means letting go and putting things in the hands of capable leaders who can execute the minutia.
Correct. But it's also, in decentralized command, you're still holding that individual accountable.
You're holding all those individuals accountable. The thing that they need to see, if you want people to be accountable within your organization, the number one thing is that you have to be accountable for your actions and everything that you do as well, because nobody likes a hypocrite. And if you're the guy, we're talking before about being late, how do you come down on your staff for being 15 minutes late if you're a half an hour late every day? It's not going to work.
Correct.
It just
Right,
doesn't. It
right.
just doesn't fly. People can see right through that nonsense. And I guarantee every one of us has worked for somebody that liked to beat his chest and yell and scream and be a dick and tell everybody that they should work harder, power through all that stuff. But we watched his habits or her habits, and you're going, you're a hypocrite. You don't practice what you preach. That's the big one. Practice
that's
what you preach.
that's the first person or the last person to show up in the morning and the first one to leave in the afternoon, right?
Yeah, we've all worked for them.
That's a non-present leader.
You know,
We know
great
somebody who
leader's a
works for
great
one of us
role
now.
model, right? That's a common cliche term too. A great
Yeah.
leader's a great role model, but it's true. You know, you can't get that respect without being a great role model. And you know, Jason, it's nice to hear it from your perspective of, you know, so you've got different levels of decentralized leadership that you're talking about. And I think Will's on almost a little bit of that, you know, like that platoon leader level where you've got accountability under a pretty big squad of people. And if you decentralize too much, it might get out of hand out of you or for you. But versus where if you're from a tiered approach, like your first sergeant, for example, let's just say, you know, he's got that more of the visibility that you see, kind of step
Sure.
back, you know, at the end of the day, you're still accountable and you're still, you know, you're still present, but you're not present all the time. Like you're not that voice in the back of the head. And although I've had some pretty badass first sergeants that, you know, voice is always in the back of your head.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not, it's not really going away.
A part of what I agree is a great first sergeant is somebody that, you know, you're afraid of, right? Like you're kind of afraid to go
For the right
approach him,
reasons.
but at the same time, like he is completely open, compassionate, and caring, you know, and willing to listen to any of your concerns. But you know that you have to come to him with a valid concern, or don't come to him.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't come to me with no bullshit.
that to me is the kind of fear that you're talking about is the fear. It's not fear of retribution. It's fear of letting down somebody that you respect.
100%.
And that's a very different kind of fear. And that fear that's a two-way street. To use my example, the guy that's responsible for the nuts and bolts, the everyday, day-to-day operation for my company, Troy, who I mentioned earlier, is a stud. He is so squared away. I've never seen another human being in my life that works as hard as this guy works. I'm so impressed by him on a day-to-day basis. Does everyone have parts of their game that they need to improve?
Absolutely, man.
For
Absolutely,
sure.
100%.
I have more than 99% of people, so I'm in no position to throw any stones, right? I got a ton of shit that I work on every single day, and I should probably work on it some more. But interestingly enough, despite the fact that I'm the founder of the company, I'm still the majority owner of the company, I find myself, frankly, feeling accountable to him. And it's because of the example that he leads with. It's that's the kind of fear that you're talking about.
100%.
When we have something that we're working on, or we square away a time to get together and sit down and go through something, I owe it to him not only to be on time, not only to be prepared, but to give that 100% of my effort. Do I have to, according to the corporate structure of my company? No, I don't even have to show up. What are they going to do, fire me?
Yeah.
But the people that have that attitude end up screwing up everything within their organization because they lead in a way that makes everybody else feel like they're beneath them. And that's bullshit. That's not a good way to run any organization, any platoon, anything. When I set something up to meet with Troy and we're discussing, let's just say the direction that we're going to go with our commercial side of our business for that year, I need to show up on time, prepared with ideas. Not because there's going to be any consequences if I don't, but because I owe that to him, because he's a good leader. Whether or not he's my leader is meaningless.
Absolutely. And that's why you want to do that, is because he has earned that respect through that. And that's you know, going all the way back to that accountability. He's instilled that level of accountability in that piece of the work, as well as you've instilled it in him and yourself. So it's like a big circle
Right.
of holding yourself and then that other individual to that same thing. I love it, and I wish I would have explained that piece. So I'm glad that you.
I got your back,
did
bro.
that, because
No
it's
doubt.
important to important to explain that type of fear.
That's an understatement when Jason says he's got Will's back. I just want to say that right.
Too much
Just wanna
sometimes
say
it seems.
He's had it a couple of times.
But no, that goes back. it's earned, and that's I guess one of the big takeaways for people that are trying to figure out how to be more accountable and how to hold other people more accountable. If you want to lead, be someone worth following. It's pretty simple.
Dude, 100%.
A title doesn't mean shit. And that seems like a really basic, simple statement, but I have worked with a ton of people that hand me a business card that has a title on it.
Dude,
and I walk away from that
long as
interaction. 100%. I walk away from that interaction going, how the hell did you get here?
Yeah.
Because who would follow
100%. 100%. Like, it is crazy to me when I hear some people's titles, and I'm just like, it's what our society has come to, right? It's the same thing with like the value of you have to have a master's degree and you've got to have all this stuff. And now if your title isn't X amount of length on a resume and I'm hiring you for a corporate company, like I'm not interested because your title isn't big enough. But it doesn't tell me anything about you as an individual. And it's why I've joked with this with my wife, but you know, all joking aside is I'm like, if I'm interviewing somebody for a job, the questions are not your standard questions that somebody is going to be able to prepare for.
You can't do marry, fuck, kill in a job interview, Will. It's against the rules.
Says who? Says who?
I don't know. Yeah.
But honestly, like to me, you need to get that person off of their, you know, their pedestal or their like,
yeah.
This is my education. This is my title. This is my
right.
blah,
Well,
blah,
that,
blah.
And
because it doesn't matter. Either you can lead or you can't lead.
It doesn't mean it doesn't matter, and that's the shitty part about it is that unfortunately, sometimes I forget how my words land on the ears of certain people, and a lot of people are going to listen to that and be like, "Oh yeah, that's my boss. They don't deserve to be called a leader. They're a dick." Well, here's the good news: if that's true, you know, most of the time the people that are throwing those things around. Usually it's not true. But if that's true, the good news is they're not long for the world. And that's called an opportunity.
Correct. 100%. Yeah. And the question is, are you willing to take that opportunity? And it's an opportunity twofold. One, if you're a true leader, like you say you are because you're trying to get that leader's job, right? So you're a true leader. So what are you doing to coach that leader to make them better? What are you doing to fix your current situation, right? And if you can't fix that current situation, but you're the best leader, if you were the best leader, you would have fixed the current situation and you would have helped that person and made them into a great leader, because a great leader develops others.
Correct.
Right? It's that simple. But otherwise, like, you're setting yourself up to take that job because the person above them can see down 2-3 levels. You know, at a max, I would say they can see down about 3 levels. But they can see down and they can start to see that, hey, this person is the next leader that I want. I need this person in that person's place. And a good leader is going to make that happen. He's going to figure out how to make that work in their system of their company or their organization. And it's going to happen. But I will challenge you right now. You cannot call yourself a good leader without trying to mentor the person above you if there's somebody above you in your work structure. Because that's leadership.
You're right.
Plain and simple.
You're
if
right.
that person's making a mistake somewhere and you call yourself a good leader, you have to be able to approach them and talk to them about that and help develop them to be a good leader. Otherwise, you're not a good leader. It's that simple. It's being able to lead and being able to be led. And coaching and balancing those things are what make people great leaders. And that is what I tell everybody. Like, it's both sides. You've got to be able to do both sides, and you've got to be good at both sides.
And I think another big component to that is constant quest for improvement at any level of the company. If
100%, man, constant quest.
You've been around some really impressive people in your career, yeah? I mean, both of you guys.
Absolutely.
You know, here and there. I mean, you know, I feel like that's it's hard to put someone on a pedestal like that, and you know, without saying. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sitting in front of 2 right now. So
well,
let me tell you,
one and a half.
I'm with it.
I have my moments, but I'm no Will Koken.
I ain't that good either. Like, let's be honest. I'm not.
Well, but that's the whole point. I think as I'm sitting here, I'm. It's easy to get lost in the conversation. We're just bullshitting with each other, and we don't really think about how a lot of this stuff is going to be consumed to somebody else that listens. And as I'm talking, I'm thinking to myself, oh shit, people are actually going to listen to this, and some of this stuff, some of these diatribes sound a little douchey. I don't think I have everything figured out. You don't think you have everything figured out. If someone asks me scale of 1 to 10, what kind of leader are you? I'm probably a 3 because I look at, I found myself in a situation because I founded my company, and all of a sudden there was more work than I could do myself. And I was like, oh shit, I got to hire people. How do you hire people?
So here's where I would say that you're above half, right? And this is why, and this is the sole reason why, right? Because I don't necessarily like. I know that I'm far from the best leader ever, right? I've got a tremendous amount of distance to go, but I believe if you focus on, if one of your focus is on being a better leader, and you're reading books on it, and you're listening to podcasts, and you're having conversations about it, and finding new ways to lead people, because every individual is led differently, right? Going back and doing self-reflections, holding yourself accountable to becoming a better leader, I believe you have instantly gone to the top 50%. Because the best leaders are the best people at anything ever, right? If you want to be the best tennis player, what do? You constantly work on performing your art of being a tennis player.
Right.
If you want to be the best leader, you're constantly working on performing your art of being a better leader. And so anybody who is...
And you're listening to this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. So anybody who wants to be a better leader is out there focused on becoming a better leader. And if you're doing that, I immediately put you in the top half. Because you're taking an open look. The moment you open up a book on leadership and you start to go through the pages and pick up on it, and you begin to reflect on yourself and start to hold yourself accountable to some of those techniques and trying them and seeing how Jason reacts versus Justin reacts and going through that process, you need to start telling yourself that you are in the top half of leaders, because you are. It's that simple. The moment that you open the first page of a book on how to become a better leader, or you listen, or you have an open conversation with somebody who is in a leadership role about things, you just became a better leader, because you're not only making yourself better, but likely you're making the person that you're conversating with better as well, if you're doing it through conversation. So that, to me, immediately moves somebody from a 5 and below to a 6 and above leader. And that's just the way it is.
There's nothing wrong with having a ton of work to do.
100%. I know I have a ton of work to do, but because I'm super focused on it, and that it is an important part to me, is how can I be led better? Because I'm in the military. I've got people above me, right? Mm-hmm. How can I be led better? Is one of my focuses. Like, what am I doing? Am I taking power away from my leader? What am I doing? And so, like, because
how you can improve.
Because of those reasons, and you're open to them, it immediately puts you in the top half. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
You could be one of the worst leaders out there, but if you're open to it, you're going to get so much better, so much faster, that you're already at that point.
Yeah, and Jason, I'm not really even surprised by your grade, because, it kind of tells me you're willing to grow and you're willing to learn. So, as Will said, that puts you in the top 50% right there. And we all are kind of a little bit. We're hard on ourselves, right? I think we all give ourselves low scores, and the person that gives themselves a 10 out of 10 is probably not the right person for the job, because
they're probably a 1 as a leader. Honestly, I guarantee they micromanage.
Oh, anybody that gives himself a 10 out of 10 and try, if anybody that you walk up to and say, okay, you've been managing this team for the last 6 months, what grade would you give yourself? Everybody's like A+. You don't want to work for that guy. Fire that asshole.
Or you get if you ask somebody, what's the worst mistake you made? I don't make mistakes. That kind of answer. It's just, everybody makes mistakes. So if you're listening, just because you think, well, man, these guys don't make mistakes, that's not wrong. First you hear is pronounce words.
I make all the mistakes.
Yeah, 100%. So the last thing that I want to end tonight with is the last piece of accountability that you would want to pass on to somebody, or a strategy to hold people more accountable if people have questions about that. So the last piece that I'm going to leave everybody with is remember that every individual has to be held to a level of accountability differently. There's no blanket that you can just lay over it and be like, this is how you hold everybody accountable. This is what works. It's the only thing that works to hold people accountable. That doesn't exist.
No.
So you have to understand what people value. And once you understand what people value, then you can begin to build accountability strategies that work towards that. But the only way that they can be accountability strategies is if you have a way to vet them or hold those a measurable way to hold those strategies
Sure.
accountable. So once you come up with like, Jason values, time with family, and Justin values, he's got to have his Friday afternoons open to go drink beers with his buddies at the pub. Right. And so like now
Or in
I've got
England.
now I've got those
I'll
two.
take it.
now I've got those two values, and I'm going to begin to implement things like for Jason, hey, I know that your XYZ like has time off on Tuesdays and Thursday nights, so I'm going to get you out of here an hour earlier both of those nights, right?
Right.
If you achieve XYZ. So now I can hold you accountable because and measure that, like, okay, he's doing way more work when I tell him that he's got this, or hey, Justin, every Friday you're out at noon, right, to go sneak off to the pub before your wife notices, blah, blah, blah. And he doesn't actually do that, Ashley, but it's what I'm getting at is like,
next Friday.
Yeah.
He does.
you got to be able to
If you let me
measure
off
that
at
stuff.
noon.
And there's no pubs open anyway. So
fair. That's a good
COVID-19's
point.
got all that shit
Yeah,
shut down.
that's a good point.
But I think that like the big thing that I want to leave people with is you gotta find a way to hold individuals accountable differently, and then you've got to measure what they did with that level of accountability to really have any provability to does that method work for that individual.
Agreed. This is bringing up extreme ownership one more time. People have to know the why, not just the what. It's easy to tell people what to do. It's not as easy to tell people why they need to do it. The example that he used in the book was when they had Team 3 in Ramadi, they knew for those combat operations to be successful, they needed to not be led by SEALs. They needed to be led by Iraqis, because it was really the Iraqis that were trying to take back their own country. And what do you suppose that a group of Navy SEALs said when they told them that it was going to be, I don't know, I have no idea what the numbers, so don't quote me on it, but let's say it's 4 SEALs and 16 Iraqi Army guys. Do you think that they were super pumped, given the fact that they just spent a whole huge chunk of their career learning and training and learning to trust the SEAL to the left and to the right of them, and now you're going to tell them that they're going to be in a combat situation with a bunch of guys they barely know that don't speak the same language that they speak, that come from a different part of the world? Of course not.
Sure,
so
that was a shell shocker, yeah.
Had to be.
I mean,
so the point of that is when they asked those guys to go into combat, life and death situations with people that they had barely met, if they just said that's what we're doing, good luck getting morale up. But when you took a step back, sat down with all those guys and said, this is just the example from the book, and said that the reason that we're here is to liberate these people. The reason that we're here is to make sure that they can stand on their own. That went well.
Yeah, I told you before.
I tightened it up too.
I told you before.
Yeah, we'll fix it. It's fine.
technical difficulty.
Technical
You can cut if you need to.
Nah,
I
we don't need to
back to
cut.
you
But
now.
you know
live.
what? This is
We're live,
entertainment.
player.
Yeah,
Entertainment.
this is that live status now. So,
I was hoping something cool like that would happen at some
yeah.
point.
I saw it happening like literally slow motion.
Well,
I'm
thanks,
like,
thanks for the backup, brah.
Dude, these are heavy mics.
I was
man.
hoping it would have held up.
I was screwing around with it. Anyway, getting back to the point, what they had to do is get to these people and just say, we're not going to be able to be here forever. We can't be their guardians for the rest of time. So they're going to need to be able to stand on their own. They're going to need to execute these missions on their own. And the best way for them to do that is by using our expertise to lead those people into these situations. And that's going to be a sustainable end. You can do that in your company. That's an extreme example, which is part of the reason that book works, right? Because we're talking about situations that are legitimately life and death situations. And that's the reason that book works. Now, thankfully, most of us, people like me, are not in life and death situations. We're just in situations where we're trying to solve problems and help people out. But if your staff doesn't understand the why of what you're doing, take my business, for example. We have 24-hour service. Now, it's a weird example because everybody really understands the why for the most part. But let's just imagine for a second that the service that I provided was seemingly non-essential. If we just tell people, so here's the deal. I'm going to give you a cell phone, and you're going to put it next to your bed. And when that thing rings at 2 o'clock in the morning, you have to get up, leave your house, and go do a job. What's the job? I don't know. It might be anything. You could be there for 2 hours. You could be there for 6 hours. You could be there until we punch in the following morning. I have no idea. Well, that sounds like a horrible idea. But if they know the why, because if we don't do this, no one else will. And people are going to suffer. I guess this reels back to core value number 2, compassion. So that's kind of piggybacks on what you're saying. My big thing in terms of getting people to be accountable for their actions and moving in the right direction is make sure that they really understand the why and not just the what. And make sure that the person that they're expected to follow is holding the standard and frankly exceeding the standard that we set for them.
Man, I could jive with you on that, Jason, because part of my job is emergency service response, storm response. So the compassion there of why you're going in that early in the morning, why you're answering that phone call. I mean, heck, I thought I was like living a day in my life in July when a giant storm comes out and takes power out to 100,000 people across Wisconsin.
Yeah,
that's the scenario you just explained. So
exactly.
Yeah, I mean it's great. So
it's not cool when you have to be the person that's in their shoes, but
it's tough,
necessary.
Yeah. It's stressful too,
And be glad, be happy that you've chosen a career. I mean, to your point, one thing that all of us have in common, and one thing that's probably been really, really good and served us well in our careers, is that we've chosen to do something that's important. Now, on its nose, it might not seem to be as significant to the rest of the world. I mean, obviously, we have exposure to some people that do some pretty important things because we're always watching them in the media, things like that. But how important are you to your community? How important are you to your neighbors, the people that you are responsible for and frankly accountable for? And all of us are fortunate enough to have a career where when we're called on, it's really fucking necessary that we get there.
Yeah, 100%.
That's a big, big, big deal.
For sure. It's just kind of like the unknown, the unknown heroes out there, It's not just service members, and it's not just police force or military, even though hands down my utmost respect to them, but there are many of services out there that are unsung heroes out there.
Dude, it's awesome to see them actually come to light through this process, through this COVID-19 stuff, to see the people that should be valued at a higher level, to truly actually have the value that they've earned.
I'm glad you brought that up. When you talk about what essential services mean, the essential, non-essential thing kind of came up, and obviously we were just joking earlier that I guess in like Colorado and California, weed dispensaries were determined to be essential, which is kind of funny. I don't know, essential at curing boredom, I guess. I mean, maybe there are like 3 actual medical patients out there. I have no idea, but I think that for a lot of people, one of the most frustrating things, and I don't want to go negative here, but one of the most frustrating things that I've experienced is watching people who are required to go to work right now during this time complaining about it.
Yeah, when they're just super fortunate to have a job.
Not only fortunate to have a job, but should feel really good about the fact that during what's essentially a global crisis, at least according to the people who are I'm not a scientist or a doctor. I have no idea. I'm in no position to make any determination whether or not this is as big a deal.
But according to the media that we follow, as a global, I guess, economy, if you want to call it their global civilization, we follow the media that has presented this as a global crisis.
Yeah, well, at least people have presented it to them that way, and we have no choice but to be like, hey, shit, okay, I guess that's the way this goes. But I find it frustrating that some people whose jobs have been determined to be so valuable that they can't sit this one out are upset because they have to go to work when some other people do. And that's a tiny, tiny minority of people. I completely acknowledge that.
I agree.
But what a great, to me, when my industry was considered to be essential, I wasn't upset that I had to go to work. I was like, damn right. Right. And I think my staff
feels good to be
too.
needed. It feels good to be needed.
Purpose.
No, 100%. That gives a lot of meaningful purpose to your life, and that's one of the roots to being happy in life is having a meaningful purpose. I mean, Will, my first podcast, I already talked about Ikigai and how much I believe in that, and the whole concept behind Ikigai is having a purpose.
Yeah, I forgot about that, but that's right.
I mean, so we're all looking for that, and if you got something that has that, just embrace it and enjoy it, because honestly, it's hard to find. So, You know, I guess if you want to circle around to me for talking about accountability
Yeah, I was
and
just
how to
gonna
get
hit you
to
up
Yeah,
about it. Yeah.
it's your time, bro.
and how to get and how I like to measure accountability in my life and maybe others is by having a goal. Obviously, that's just huge and it's cliche, but it is. You got to have a goal, and I think the biggest thing in having a goal and achieving that goal is having little tiny micro goals that get you to that goal. They may be subconscious micro goals. You know what I
Yeah, but
mean?
even like you said, like
But
you've been setting these for the end goal is September for the race that you got everybody doing. But you've been setting these 2 week goals. Like
yeah,
here's a 2 week plan. It's a very micro goal in the
yeah,
grand scheme of it.
yeah. Just a little micro element of that goal, little tiny day by day, hour by hour pieces that are going to get you to that end result. That's probably one of the biggest, most important pieces to accountability because it keeps you unconsciously accountable. You know what I mean?
For sure.
You're ultimately accountable because that's repetition for you. That's kind of force a habit, and then it just starts driving you towards that goal, and who knows, soon you're accomplishing it. So
No, absolutely, man. I think that's what we'll end this off on tonight is that exact fact. Set some micro goals to achieve the big goals. But again, just find creative ways to hold yourself accountable, as well as others. And if you've got any ideas for us to hold other people accountable that you want to get out there, that you think are good ideas, please pass them on to me, and I will definitely share them in future episodes. But for tonight, that's where we're going to end it. So hope you guys all have a good day. And remember, you got to hold yourself accountable. Pick some things, start to measure them, hold yourself accountable to them. Have a good night.
Awesome.
We're out.
stay unbreakable.